We're going to cover the case storage feature of Monolith, and I'll go through the slides here. There's basically just two slides, so this won't take very long, and then we'll switch over to Monolith. But basically, what case storage tracking is in Monolith is it's a special feature inside of each case where you can track storage items that you're using to store, what I'm referring to as post collection data. So whenever we create forensic images, or we use Cellbrite or GrayKey or Axiom or whatever your favorite tool is to pull data off of smartphones, we're going to store that data somewhere. Depending on your organization and how you're doing it, you may have a large cache of storage drives. Everybody uses those 1 to 2 terabyte external USB storage drives, or you might have SSDs or something, or you may just have a large storage array. It could be 50, 100 terabytes that you're storing everything on, or you might have a combination. You might use both. So I created this feature because I noticed talking to a lot of customers and a lot of both in the private and public sector that this is a common thing where we have these storage drives and they're just kind of storing data and they're all over the place. And realistically, we want to track this stuff because even though it's not our physical evidence, it's not the smartphone, it's not the computer that we're processing, but it still is evidence. It still is, we're storing forensic images, we're storing evidence related to our case on it. We still want to track that if we can. We want to know not only for chain of custody purposes, but also we want to know for our own sanity. If we have 100 cases a month and we want to know where everything is, we want to know, where did I put this acquisition, where is all the data for this case stored. We want to have a way to track that, just for simple management reasons. So primary reasons we want to track is, case storage is also evidence. We want to maintain chain of custody for our storage devices so that if we walk into court or we give a drive to a prosecutor, or to, if we're in the private sector, to a client in a law firm, we want some record that if that storage device ends up in court, that we can produce a record saying, here's our chain of custody for this storage device, where we pulled it out of our storage cache, we started adding data to it, and then we provided it to the person outside of our lab, which again could be a lawyer or a prosecutor, or even could be defense counsel, something along those lines. It also helps us to determine, like, per case, how much of our resources are we applying to this case. So you might have one case that maybe you only use one drive for, and that's all it needs. Maybe it's even a small thumb drive or something. Another case you might have, just because it's a big case and maybe it lasts for 2 years that you're constantly doing work for, you might consume 30 different storage devices for it because you're providing data to multiple parties, or maybe just you're providing a storage drive for every single piece of evidence that you're getting, and you're getting a couple of new pieces of evidence for a case every month. This will help you track, like, okay, we've consumed 30 storage drives for this case. And also we can use it in Monolith to do things like, how much data are we storing for a case. It's once you start storing half a terabyte size forensic images, that can really add up, and this can help you basically see, okay, for this one case we're storing X amount of data, and then potentially that can lead into how much data are we storing total, how much data are we acquiring per month, that sort of thing. So how does Monolith help you do this? Well, first, it helps you maintain a usable storage cache, which means there's a main storage item section of Monolith where you can enter all the storage devices you have, including any large storage arrays, and then any storage drive that you have that you're using for various cases. Monolith will let you record acquisitions, and when you're adding an acquisition into Monolith, you can tell Monolith, hey, this thing was copied to these drives. So that way Monolith knows, and you can look up later. If 6 months later you need to find a forensic image, you can pull that up in Monolith and quickly see, oh, okay, this image is stored on this drive, and this drive is currently located in this location. So you can go grab it and start working with it again. Monolith will let you do things like release and return storage items from end clients. So if you need to give a thumb drive with a Cellbrite report on it, or Cellbrite extraction, to to a case agent or prosecutor, you can do that. You just release the storage item in Monolith to that person, and now you have a record in Monolith showing who you released it to, and you'll also have a chain of custody that's built for that item. And what that also leads into is a little storage item report that you can export that basically documents all this information, so it's easier for you give that report to a case agent or lawyer or prosecutor, and they can quickly see from the report, oh, this is everything that's on it. This is what's on this device. You can also assign storage items to specific cases. So what this means is that once you assign that storage item to a case, as long as it's assigned to the case, it can't be used by anyone else. So a recommended workflow that I tell a lot of people is, if you're using storage devices, try to make it so that you're only using one storage device per case. That way you don't have you won't have any accidents where you accidentally give the wrong data to a client, or or have assumed that a forensic image is associated with a case just because it's on the same storage device. If your policy is, no, we have a storage device per case, that makes things a lot easier and a lot less error prone. And having said that, not everybody has that luxury. Storage devices obviously cost money and resources, so if you can't, that's fine too. But I would try to work towards that goal if possible. You can also create general storage. So this would be the situation where maybe you store multiple cases on the same drive. That's fine too. We have a general storage method of storing that data, but general storage items in Monolith do not track chain of custody because they're not associated with a specific case. So the chain of custody is a little bit harder to track for that. So general storage would be things like your large storage arrays or drives that you're storing multiple sets of case data to. And you can also recycle storage items back to the main cache for reuse. So in this situation, that would be where you've assigned a storage item to a case. Maybe the case is closed. You can now remove the data, or maybe you have one too many copies of the same data on multiple drives. Well, you can now basically remove that storage drive from the case, because you're physically taking a thumb drive, you're wiping it and getting it ready to use for another case. You can recycle that storage item from the case, and it returns it back to the main cache, making it available to use for another case. So those are the basic, different little features that are related to case storage. And what we'll do is going to cover this next slide just to show the basic case flow of how this would work in Monolith. So the first step here would be, we add any storage items we have that are ready to be used that maybe aren't used on a case yet. We add that to our main storage cache, which would be the storage section in Monolith. And then when we're ready to use one, when we're ready to use it on a case, we want to assign that storage item to the case. And then when we're collecting our data from a device, we then want to select that storage item when we're entering the acquisition. So if you're imaging a hard drive, through a write blocker on FTK Imager, or if you're using an imaging device, something like a TD3 or something, whatever drive you're using to store that forensic image on, while that's imaging, you would enter that acquisition and say, I'm storing this on storage item number 1 or number 2, or whichever item it is. And then once that phase is complete, once it's added, Monolith is going to start tracking that chain of custody for the item. And then you have options you can either release the item to someone that you're giving it to, or you can just move the item like a normal piece of evidence in Monolith to say, okay, our image is stored on this drive. We're now going to move it into our, I have a specific bin just for storage drives. We're going to move it into that location, and that's where it's going to sit. And that way, whenever you need it again, you can go back to Monolith, quickly look it up, and find where it's currently located. You can also release it to an end client, so a prosecutor or a lawyer. And that's when you're physically, you're providing that device to somebody outside of your lab. And when you release it, that will also be recorded in Monolith in both the chain of custody and in the actual, for the actual item, so that you can see it's been released. And now it's out of your lab. If the drive comes back to you, if the drive is returned from the person you released it to, you can also recollect the storage item. And all that recollecting does is it, returns it to your lab, and then you can go back and move that storage item again, or you can return it to your main cache if you want to. And that's what this last step here is removing the storage item to recycle it back to the main cache. Now this is the last step here, but technically this can be done at any point. So that's why I have it in purple down here to show you can remove the storage item at any point in the life cycle for that storage to remove it from the case and then recycle it back into your storage cache so it can be used for something else. And I'll cover specifically how this works when we take a look at Monolith. So this is the last slide here. I've uploaded this slide in the handout section of the webinar. So if you want to download this to keep it, feel free to do that. And what I'll do is go ahead and switch over to Monolith. And what we'll take a look at is the main storage section. So like I said earlier, the first step in this process or this workflow would be, you have a box with a bunch of drives in it that you use for various things. Ideally, they're wiped and ready to be used. Ideally, they're wiped and labeled, ready to be used for a case. And in Monolith, what you want to do is add those items to the case. I've already got 2 items already added in here. But let's say we add an item here. If we want to, Monolith will automatically assign a storage number if you want it, or you can assign one yourself. You can enter the type of device. So far I've entered an external hard drive or a network attached storage device. You can also have a USB thumb drive if we want. You can say our brand here. We'll say SanDisk. Model name. Cruiser, model number, have no idea. Do SD12. Serial number and size, we'll say this is a 128 gigabyte. And general storage is no. We'll say no encryption for now. This is test storage. Okay, so we've added a new storage device and we've kind of set the parameters for it. We've told Monolith this is not general storage. So what that means is if we want to use this thing, we have to assign it to a case first. Whereas with this item here, I described it as a network attached storage, but I marked it as general storage, so we don't have to assign this to a case to use it. So we can say things are stored on this anytime we want. So let's say we had this thumb drive, it was wiped, it was in our in our storage drawer that we store storage items for, and we've now added it. So from here, what we can actually do too is we can print out a label. We can use the Monolith integration with Dymo printers. We can design a storage label for this and print out a label and actually stick it onto that device so that we have some way of physically knowing which device that is in Monolith. And if we go to a case, so we have this case in Monolith already, and we're looking at our case storage section. So the next step would be we want to assign that storage device to the case. So in this case, I already have one device assigned to this, but let's say we're producing, we're going to do another acquisition, or we're going to copy that acquisition to another drive. Under case storage, we'll select assign storage, and then from our storage items list, we'll have one item listed. And the reason we have one item, so if we go back to our storage section, we'll see we have 3 total storage items. But Monolith is only giving us one option here. When we want to assign a storage item, we only see one option. And the reason for that is, out of those 3 total storage items we have in our cache, one of them is general storage, so we can't assign that to a case. The other one is already assigned. In this case, it's assigned to the current case. And then the third one is not general storage and it's not already assigned. So that means that's the only one that's available for us to use. Now you could have a situation where you've entered 100 items and only 12 of them are used. And then in that case, and then the rest are all non-general storage available items. Then in that case, you would have 88 items here to choose from. And you could select multiple if you wanted to. So in this case, we're going to select this one. We're going to set our initial location. So this is going to be the start of the chain of custody. So I'm going to set the initial location as myself. This is typically what should be the case when you're doing this, is you're saying the initial location is me because I grabbed it out of our storage cache. And then you can set the timestamp to whatever you want. just to denote, like if you did this the day prior or something, you can go back and enter that after the fact. For now, I'll just keep this as the current date and time. And we'll save that. And now that's assigned this STG3 item to the case. And now if we go back to our assign storage and try to assign something, there aren't any items left for us to assign. So we can't assign any more storage items. So we'll have to add some more if we want to assign any more devices. But now what Monolith has done is it's added it to the case and it's started a chain of custody for this storage device. So now we have, at this date and time, this user entered, assigned the storage to the case. It was pulled from our storage cache. It was moved to me, and the reason was storage item assigned to the case. And from here, we can move this device around just like a piece of evidence, or we can release it to a specific person. But we're not going to do that because we haven't done anything yet with it. So from here, let's say we want to make a copy of this acquisition to that device. Let's say we're taking this acquisition and we're making a copy of it to give to somebody outside of our organization. So what we can do here is we can select the copy icon here. And what Monolith will do is it'll basically open up the add new acquisition pop-up, but it'll pre-populate it with data from this acquisition that we're copying. And what we'll do here is we'll select our storage item. Now what you'll notice is here when we're recording, that we're adding data to a storage item, we can select which storage item we want this acquisition to be on. And here we have three options, because one is our storage, our general storage, which this is, since we marked that storage device as general, it can be used across the entire case universe in Monolith. And we also have two assigned storage items because this case has two storage drives assigned to it. So we can pick which storage device we're saying this acquisition is stored on. In this case, I'm going to say it's on the SanDisk Cruiser because that's where I'm making a copy to give to somebody else. And then everything else will keep the same because this is just a copy of an acquisition that we have. And I'll click save. And then that makes that copy of the acquisition, and we can see that under storage, it's telling us it's stored on storage item number 3. And from there, if we go back to our case storage, we now have STG0003, and now it's showing us that we have an acquisition stored on this item. And from here, let's say that we're prepping a drive to give to somebody outside of our agency. Let's say the prosecutor asks us, "Hey, I need you to provide the data from this device. We're providing it to Defense and Discovery. We want a device so we can give them the data." So in that case, that's what we're doing here. We've populated this item. You'll see here that we told Monolith, "Hey, this is a 128 gigabyte device. We just stored 50 gigabytes of data on it," and Monolith is telling us, "Hey, you've got 39.06% of this drive is used." So it just gives you a little visual cue as to how much space is left on this thing. From here, if we want to, let's say that we're releasing it, and it's released by me, and we'll release it to let's just say John Smith. John Smith came by the lab to pick it up, and that's who we're releasing it to, and we released it to him at this time. We'll click save, and now this storage item is marked as released, and we can no longer move this item or do anything with it. The only thing we can do is recollect it because we don't currently have it in our possession anymore, so we can't move it around the lab, so that option has been removed. But now that the storage item is released, we can then go to this details section and create an item report. And for the item report, we have two options. We have a default report, which I'll show in a second, and then we also have this include supplemental COC option. And what this does is it appends to the end of the report additional COC fields that can be filled out. So if you anticipate that the person you're giving this to may need additional COC spots to fill out the chain as they pass the drive around, then you can include this option. So we'll go ahead and print this out. And I'll show you this so you can see what it looks like. So this is what that storage item report looks like. And what it's doing for us is it's filling out the header with our organizational information. So right now this is saying Monolith, but would be your organization's info and your organizational logo. And then under storage item report, it's just giving some basic details about the storage device itself so that we know what device specifically this report is referring to. So things like the serial number, the storage number here, which the device should have a label on it that matches this number here. There will be a case number, things like the model number, device name, and device type. And this is there so that there's no mistaking what device this report is referring to. And then down here we have data stored on this item. So if we zoom into that, what you'll see is we have data related to evidence number EVI 00001. The format of the image is a tar file. The size is 50 gigabytes. This is the date it was acquired. And then under evidence info, we have the hash values for this image. So in here, and we have an MD5 and a SHA-1. And then at the top here, we also have information about the device that this image is related to. So the idea here is that someone should be able to look at this report, and without even touching that storage drive, they automatically know what's contained on it. And this is very useful because I've experienced this myself in the forensics industry, where you get random drives, you have no idea what's on it, and there's no way to tell until you actually just look at the data and maybe look at the acquisition logs or something like that to figure out what it is. But with a report like this, you can quickly print this out, and if you want to, you can include it into an anti-static bag that you have the drive in that you're handing over, or you can email it to somebody. If you can provide them with the drive and then say, hey, what's your email? I'm going to email you the report for this item so you know what's on it. And you can basically handle this however you wish. And then here we have our chain of custody. So this is going to just match the chain of custody that Monolith stored for this storage item. And you can be as straightforward if you want. You can be as simple as this, where you just show, hey, this thing was assigned to the case and then we released it. Or you can be a lot more granular, where you can show that you assigned to the case and then put it into storage for a while, or maybe you moved it around the lab a few times to do different things with it, and then you released it. This is just like managing your evidence COC, where you can be as granular or as simple as you want. And then at the bottom here, since I selected that supplemental chain of custody option, what it's doing is it's just adding additional COC fields. So that if you need, for some reason, if you need someone to have the ability to conduct additional moves with this item, you can have them use this to continue a chain of custody. So this can happen if you're providing the item to maybe a prosecutor and they don't have a system in place for tracking COC for items. You can provide this to them to give them something to continue that chain for. So all they have to do then is just keep, if you give it to someone that works at the prosecutor's office, and then they take it to their lab and they give it to someone else, they can use this to maintain that chain of custody for the item if they need it, if they don't have their own system in place. So it's just there for convenience, basically. So we'll switch back over to Monolith. Okay, so I know I've covered a lot there, but any questions so far? Any thoughts anybody has, or anything you want to put into the chat, just let me know. Because that pretty much covers the bulk of the case storage option. Okay. So other features here that we have, we have an export table. So this is just like the table export in every other area of Monolith. It will export whatever you have visible in this field. You have things like storage notes. So if you want to create a more detailed set of notes, so this comes out in that storage item report. So if you wanted to, for instance, provide more detail about what's on this thing, you can say storage device contains forensic image data from 3 devices, and also includes forensic reports related to these items. So you could, basically update this to have that, so that when you produce that item report, that will now come out in the description, so that anybody can read that and say, oh, okay, that's what's on here. Additionally, we also have for storage items, we can record the encryption key. So if we encrypt these devices with BitLocker or other encryption software, or if it's an Apicorn drive or something, we can store those encryption keys internally so that we can manage it. So for this device, I have an encryption key for it. So I just click the show encryption key and it will give me the encryption key for that device. This device does not have an encryption key, so there's no option for that, but we can add one. So here I'll just add password to that, save it, and now we have that show encryption key option for this. And then we can see whatever the encryption key is. So this can come in handy if once you get to, if you have a few hundred storage items in here and a third of them are, in use and encrypted, this is an easy way to quickly just, look for the storage item you're trying to find and then quickly, pull up the encryption key for it. So that when you're trying to access that data or add new data to it, you can then quickly find it, pull out the encryption key, and then decrypt it so that you can do what you need to with it. So as a quick demonstration, I'll show the recollect option. So we gave this item to John Smith. John Smith had it for a while, and then he brings it back to us. They don't need it anymore for some reason. They just want to return it to us. So we'll use the recollect option. And now in Monolith, we want to tell, this is the next chain of custody record. So we're telling Monolith, okay, who received this item when it got returned? Again, I'll put myself, and then again, we'll say received from, I'll say John Smith, because John Smith brought it back to us and returned it. And I'll say it was returned on August 15th. So now we have a new chain of custody record where it's showing that John Smith returned the item and it was recollected and was returned to me. And now the item is currently at me. So now from here, I can go back to handling moves. I can move this thing into storage. So now it's in storage, and this goes back to our location section. We're here under our evidence cage, and because I moved that storage item to A1, we now have an identifier here that's telling us, hey, there's one storage item located at this location. And then we can see here that item is STG0003. And then from there, we can continue to move it, or we can check the item out. If we need to, we can move it back to myself if I'm getting ready to, do something with it. We can also remove it from the case entirely. So that's what this button does. So the important thing about removing a case is removing the storage item from a case is, and it gives you the warning here, are you sure you want to remove this storage item? The storage item will be completely removed from the case and recycled back to the storage cache for reuse. So what this is going to do is it's going to remove everything about the storage item related to this case. So we're going to lose our chain of custody. We're going to lose, the image will stay here, but it will be disassociated from the storage device. So for this 03 item, we have an image name called test image, and that's what's right here. So this image is going to stay, but this, its connection to that storage device is going to disappear. So we'll do this, go ahead and remove it, say remove. Now it's been removed from the case, so it's no longer associated with it. And if we go to our acquisitions, the acquisition is still there, but it's no longer associated with the case. So this is a situation where if we want to wipe a drive that has a copy of an acquisition on it, what we want to do is remove it from the case, which recycles it back to our storage cache, because now it's available to be assigned. But then we also want to go to our acquisitions and we want to separately delete this. We want to remove this acquisition from our cases list so that we know that it doesn't exist anymore. And the reason for that is because you may have situations where you want to maintain a record that we acquired something, but you don't necessarily need to record that it's stored on anything anymore. Because maybe this is your prime acquisition and you want to maintain that, yeah, we acquired this thing, and you want to maintain that record in Monolith, but you just don't need it to be associated with the storage device anymore. So that's completely optional. So you don't have to do it if you don't want to. But in this case, we created that thumb drive because we knew we were going to copy our acquisition to it. And now that we don't need it anymore, we recycled it back to our cache. We can go ahead and clean up and delete that acquisition that was just a copy. Like, it doesn't need to be there anymore. So beyond that, that's pretty much the entire feature set for case storage. Probably the last feature here is you can add a case storage item directly. So instead of adding it to the main storage cache first, you can add it directly to the case instead. So you can create a new storage item, and adding it here will automatically assign it to the case. That way you don't have to, if you don't have a large cache of drives just waiting to be assigned, and you get a drive pretty much for every time you create a case or something, you can just add them here manually on the case itself, and then it'll automatically appear here and it'll automatically be assigned to the case. So that pretty much covers everything for it for this section. So, pretty much gonna wrap this up and let you guys go. Does anybody have any follow-up questions or anything like that? Or is there anything about this that's confusing or anything that doesn't make sense? Or any suggestions on additional features for this? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. And thanks again for joining. I'm going to have a recording of this that I'll send out, and I'm also going to send out the recording from yesterday as well. So you guys should all receive that pretty soon. And again, this is Matt with Monolith. So any questions at all, feel free to reach out. Email is matt@monolithforensics.com. And thanks again for coming, everybody. I really appreciate it.